Just being the best version of yourself. I don't think you need to try to be anybody else. So I think that's always what I'm trying to remember.
Today I want to talk about white feminism and how it got swallowed whole by capitalism, how it forgot its roots in collective struggle and just became an aesthetic brand, a business model, a girl boss mantra that sells empowerment but delivers absolutely nothing. If you have listened to my last episode on individualistic healing, you'll recognize this pattern. When something sacred like healing, feminism, liberation gets filtered through whiteness, through capitalism, through individualism, through patriarchy, it loses its power. It becomes all about image and nothing about integrity. This isn't a personal attack on anyone, it's just a cultural critique, because what we've been sold as feminism, especially in the West, often centres a few white women, sidelines the rest, and rewards assimilation over resistance. So today I'm going to pull that apart a little bit. I'm going to look at how mainstream feminism got co-opted by white supremacy and neoliberal values, how self-care became a luxury product, how empowerment became something you can sell, and why real feminism can survive inside a system designed to oppress, because white feminism isn't liberation, it's just girl boss capitalism. So what even is white feminism? White feminism isn't just feminism that's practiced only by white people. It's a specific ideology. It's a watered down, sanitized and depoliticalized version of feminism that mostly centers whiteness and ignores systems of oppression. And it treats personal success as the same thing as collective liberation. It says, look at me, I got the job, I got a seat at the table, I'm empowered, without ever asking why it was so hard for a woman to get there in the first place and why it's so hard for women, especially Black people, to even enter the room. It doesn't interrogate the system that made it so hard to get there in the first place. White feminism isn't inherently about race, it's about power and who's allowed to hold that power without ever having to name the structures it comes from. Bell Hooks wrote that feminism is the struggle to end sexist oppression, not to manage it, not to rebrand it, but to end it completely. But white feminism rarely concerns itself with oppression beyond patriarchy. That's why Rafia Zakakara in her book Against White Feminism says that white feminism has always been about individual achievement. It is rooted in the belief that the ultimate goal for women is to become like men in power, not to transform the power structures themselves. And we see this very, very clearly in the first wave of feminism, the suffrage movement. Women like Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony were fighting for the right to vote, but not for all women. When the possibility arose that Black men might gain the vote before white women, many white suffragettes showed their true colours. They made openly racist arguments claiming they were more fit to vote than Black men. Meanwhile, Black women like Sojourner Truth and Frances Alice Watkins Harper were actively organising, not just for gender rights, but for racial justice, abolition and education. They were never invited to the centre of the movement. They were seen as useful, but also disposable. Their labour was accepted, but they were never invited to be in any sort of position of leadership. Fast forward to the second wave of feminism in the 1960s and 70s, and you'll find kind of the same pattern. This wave gave us reproductive rights, the fight against workplace discrimination, and consciousness rising. But it also sidelined working class women, lesbians, and especially women of colour. Bell Hooks and Audre Lorde were writing during this time, naming very clearly that their womanhood was not being reflected in the feminist movement. Lorde famously said, "The master's tools will never dismantle the master's house." I have said that a few times in a few of my different podcasts, but yeah, it's pretty relevant to so many issues. But white feminism kept using the same tools, climbing the same ladders and playing the same games. We've replaced collective struggle with individual achievement. We've turned feminism into a cutesy brand where the goal is to look empowered, sound progressive, but stay marketable. Not to get too angry, not to be too divisive, and not to make anyone uncomfortable, because that's not what sells. But real feminism is not supposed to sell. It's supposed to disrupt. So for example, I will be talking a lot more about Florence Given later, but for example, let's just take Florence Given. She became the best-selling feminist author preaching empowerment, boundaries, and personal healing. But when it came time to speak about Palestine or women in war-torn countries or systems of violence that actually affect women's lives globally, crickets. Absolute crickets. Same with people like Taylor Swift. Her feminism only seems to kick into gear when it's about her and her own career, or when she is pressured and called out. Not when it comes to the rights of marginalized women, just when she feels like she has to. White feminism thrives on this performance of empowerment. It's like an aesthetic mood board. It loves to tell you to set boundaries, go to therapy, and take up space, but it hates any sort of accountability. It doesn't really take into account any real intersectionality when it gets uncomfortable. It doesn't like to be asked to take it deeper than girl power. In 2013, Facebook COO Sheryl Sandberg published the book called Lean In: Women, Work, and the Will to Lead. It quickly became a bestseller and kind of corporate feminism manifesto. And the core message was basically that women hold themselves back. And if they just leaned in more at work, spoke up more in meetings, and stopped doubting their own power, they too could rise to the top. It was basically like a polished, marketable, digestible girl boss kind of book, and it was everywhere, from TED Talks to corporate retreats to college campuses. The book kind of went viral, I guess. But here is my problem. Lean in feminism is built on the idea that the system is fair, that women just need to push harder, to try harder, to exist within it. It doesn't talk about structural inequality. It doesn't address racism, classism, ableism, or misogyny. It doesn't examine why millions of women don't have the ability to lean in because they're already leaning in so far just to survive. A lot of women are working multiple jobs, raising children alone, navigating unsafe workplaces, dealing with medical discrimination or immigration status, living in communities without basic access to education or any sort of healthcare. For a lot of women, leaning in isn't possible at all. It kind of again puts the blame on the women for not trying hard enough, for not leaning in enough, without any sort of criticism or critique of the systems that we exist under. The big myth of lean in is that a woman's failure to rise is all about her confidence, not about the systems. But we know that this is absolutely false. Study after study shows that women of color, are not being paid less, passed over, or pushed out because they're not assertive enough. They are being excluded by design. And even when they do succeed, they're still punished. They're called aggressive, unlikable, difficult. They're forced to work twice as hard for half of the reward. Sandberg's version of feminism also implies that liberation looks like becoming a CEO, but doesn't want to ask why we should want more women to succeed in systems that exploit everyone else. She doesn't want to question the structure of the workplace itself. She does not want to interrogate capitalism because she is benefiting from it. She doesn't challenge the fact that Facebook, the company that she helped run, has been complicit in spreading disinformation, destabilizing democracy, and profiting off surveillance. In fact, Sandberg helped make Facebook more profitable by pioneering this very ad model that extracts our attention and monetizes our data. So when she says lean in, what she's really saying is play the game. Don't change it. She doesn't tell women to organize or unionize or redistribute their wealth or dismantle any sort of capitalistic system. She tells them to work harder within an exploitative system, to behave more like men, to become the boss, girl boss, feminism. So when I'm saying that white feminism is just kind of like girl boss capitalism. This is what I mean. It's feminism without any politics. It's liberation that only centers thin white people. It's empowerment that depends on other people staying oppressed. It's dangerous not because it's mean or because it's messy, but because it looks progressive while maintaining the status quo. It's feminism that wants a bigger piece of the pie without ever having to ask who is starving while I'm eating this huge piece of the pie. Just focus on yourself is not a feminist strategy. It is a survival mechanism dressed up as liberation, and it's killing actual healing and feminist movements. We live in a world where women are told that healing is the same thing as freedom, that self-care is the revolution, that if you just meditate, set boundaries, drink enough water and raise your vibration, you will transcend your own oppression. You will become unbothered. But here is the problem, how I see it. Individual healing does not equal collective liberation. This is something that I went really deep on in my last podcast that I will leave here somewhere, and you can go watch that. It's all about individualistic healing and the problem with just focusing on ourselves and without including any sort of collective care or liberation. So if you're interested in that kind of thing, go and check out the last video that I made. When we act like individual healing equals collective liberation, we kind of lose the plot entirely. The phrases we hear constantly, like you can't pour from an empty cup and self-care is political, do the inner work first, were never meant to be slogans for absolving yourself from any sort of movement. Audre Lorde said that self-care was an act of political warfare, not a spa day. She was a black queer woman with cancer raising a child in a white supremacist state, not an influencer telling you to light a candle and ignore the news. But late stage capitalism can actually commodify pretty much anything, including liberation. So now we have that girl or it girl culture. We have hot girl walks, we have skincare routines dressed up as feminism and activism. We have 100 different ways to brand your lifestyle as feminist, as long as you don't say anything too political. This shift from collective action to personal branding perfectly mirrors capitalism. Capitalism does not reward any form of resistance. It rewards assimilation. It wants you to be empowered in the ways that doesn't threaten the status quo. So instead of organizing, we will self-optimize. Instead of marching, we will meditate and manifest. And again, I'm not trying to like talk shit about meditation or manifestation or self-care or any of that kind of stuff. I think all of that stuff is really important in healing and in political movements. But if that's just where you stay, if all you're doing is healing yourself and focusing on yourself, and you don't go any further than that, then I think that's the problem. So that's what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about everyone who's on a healing journey, who does like to manifest and journal and meditate and self-optimize. Those are all really good things, but if you're only ever going to focus on yourself, and that's where it's capped, that's where your feminism stays, that's where your healing stays, then that is a massive problem, in my opinion. White feminism has always leaned into individualism. Back in the 1800s, suffragette leaders, who I spoke about before, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, weren't fighting for all women. They were fighting for themselves. She famously opposed black men getting the right to vote, arguing that white women were more civilized and therefore more deserving of a vote. It's the same logic. Me first, but not all of us. And I'm sure we all know white feminist women who post feminist things all over their Instagram. Their whole entire brand is built on feminism, but have not said a word about Palestine. The ones who build multi-million euro dollar businesses off selling us feminist ideas and claim to be intersectional, but will cry victim if they're ever held accountable. These people also don't want to change the system because they are the ones that are benefiting from it. They are feeling really good inside of the system. So why on earth would they want to change it? We are now deep in the era of what Chedera Egeru has called healed white woman archetype. She's spiritual, she's soft, she's in her divine feminine era. She's setting boundaries, she's regulating her nervous system, she's following moon phases and completely detached from the material world. She's completely detached from earth. She's apolitical. She's clean girl aesthetic. She's booked and she's busy. She's entirely absorbed in herself. This type of woman is rewarded algorithmically, socially, financially for staying vague, for choosing peace over justice, for trading in her rage for marketability. She has a massive platform and she has nothing to say. Or more dangerously, she has just enough to say to sound kind of like aware, to sound kind of like she cares, but she doesn't say enough to risk anything or to piss people off, to disrupt her income stream, or to alienate any of her followers. I'm sure we all know some people like that. In my opinion, I'm describing Florence Given, and I will be talking more about Florence Given in the next chapter. But this is where white feminism becomes completely empty, when we confuse self-maintenance for liberation, when we treat systemic injustice like it's just a vibe that we can just opt out of or ignore. But real feminism, the kind that Angela Davis, Bell Hooks and Adrienne Marie Brown write about, is not individual, it's not self-curated, and it's not cutesy all the time, and it's not soothing. It's messy, it's collective, it's rooted in relationship, it's rooted in conflict, interdependence and accountability. It asks us not just to look inward, but to also look around, to connect our healing to the world we're trying to build, not just the world that will benefit only us. Because if your feminism only works for you, is it really feminism? So think about Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift's public feminist awakening began around 2014, during her 1989 era, at the time when mainstream feminism was becoming trendy, palatable, and it was very Instagrammable. She started calling herself a feminist after being publicly educated by other women. But her feminism was never intersectional. It centered on sisterhood, self-improvement, and strong female friendships, but mostly with wealthy, thin white women. She avoided issues like race, class, LGBT, reproductive justice, or any sort of global oppression, anything that might disrupt her income and annoy her fan base. So she became the face of girl power without actually challenging the power. Taylor Swift's flavor of politics have often reflected the most comfortable and self-serving version of feminism, one that is focused on personal success, victimhood, and public image rather than systemic change. For example, her silence during key political movements like the 2016 election or Black Lives Matter protest was only broken after years of public critique, and even then her activism was cautious and safe and very cutesy and careful. This is classic white feminism, speaking up only when it's safe, only when it centers yourself, and mostly only aligning with causes after they've become kind of trendy or after you've been pressured into it. So basically, this type of white feminism, it's safe enough to not alienate anyone, to not disrupt your money. It's safe enough to still not piss anyone off, not really say anything. You're still selling records, you're still selling out stadiums. It's only slightly just inspiring enough, but not radical. And it's never risky enough to actually lose anything or risk anything at all. So let's talk about the rise and the fall of the girl boss and what it reveals about the limits of mainstream feminism. So in the early 2010s, girl boss became a symbol of women's empowerment. She was ambitious and self-made. She was inspirational. She built her brand, monetized her passions, and she was celebrated as proof that feminism was working. Women were finally taking up space as CEOs, entrepreneurs, influencers, but over time the illusion started to crack. because the girl boss wasn't changing the rules at all. She was just succeeding at the game, a game built on capitalism, individualism, and patriarchal values. She didn't disrupt systems of power, she just mirrored them, and in doing so, she became a tool of the very structures feminism set out to dismantle. So this is kind of the same thing as hustle culture and boss babes and six-figure mornings and the way that women are sold liberation through planners, productivity hacks, and it's all wrapped up in this like kind of pastel aesthetic, because girl boss feminism did not free us. It just gave us patriarchy in this rebrand. The girl boss archetype, the girl that is relentlessly productive, a self-optimized woman who built her business and body like a brand, is not radical. It's just hustle culture dressed up in pink. It rewards overwork, glamorizes burnout, and teaches women that freedom comes from financial success, no matter how it is achieved. And this ideology has bled onto social media, especially TikTok. On TikTok, feminism is often stripped of its historical and political roots, and instead it's reduced to slogans, aesthetics, trends, or lifestyle content. There's hot girl walks, that girl or it girl routines, and endless content about feminine energy and how to live a soft life, how to attract a high value man. The language of empowerment is everywhere, but it's almost entirely disconnected from any political or systemic critique. TikTok's algorithm favors content that is fast, pretty, and palatable, that kind of fits in the nicely inside the lines. So it prioritizes performance over depth. When feminism becomes a vibe instead of politics, it starts to produce the very problems that it was meant to resist. A 2022 study published in Social Media and Society analysed thousands of TikTok videos with feminist hashtags. It found that while terms like empowerment and self-love were widespread, less than 8% of those videos mentioned systemic equality, race, class, or any sort of collective struggle. The majority focused on personal development, aesthetics, success, and lifestyle branding. In other words, a lot of the feminism on TikTok is often incredibly individualistic. It's about self-optimization, not solidarity. And this mirrors what we saw in the kind of girl boss era. The idea that we can liberate ourselves by becoming entrepreneurs, by monetizing our passions, healing our trauma into a brand, and working harder than anyone else. This is just a remix of capitalistic patriarchy, and it sells us the idea that we are the problem and the solution, that if we hustle hard enough, if we can escape, we can win. As Bell Hooks warned, what we do is more important than what we say or what we believe. And when we say we believe in feminism, but our lives are ruled by grind culture, aesthetic, perfectionism, and constant self-marketing, we have to ask, who is this actually serving? I've seen a lot of TikTok feminism as well, encouraging women to set like feminine goals, to create self-care routines, not for like restoration, but to become more attractive, more desirable, more productive. A lot of the self-love content as well that I see is so individualistic, it's so self-centered, it's so self-absorbed. It is not at all anything to do, in my opinion, with actual true self-love. Maybe I'll do an entire video on the self-love community and the problems within it. I could talk about that for like an hour. So if anyone wants me to do that video, let me know. And I could do an entire deep dive on the problems with the self-love community. So I found some really interesting articles about girl boss that I wanted to read from. So in 2020, Nasty Gal, the company founded by the original girl boss, Sophia Amoruso, was exposed for toxic workplace culture, for underpaying employees and laying off staff without notice. They also fired women who were about to go on maternity leave, by the way. Girl boss. This company filed for bankruptcy. That same year, multiple female-led wellness brands were called out for mistreating workers of color, appropriating indigenous practices, and using unpaid labor while preaching girl boss empowerment online. So Nasty Gal is part of the Boohoo Group, the biggest fast fashion retailer and promoter in the UK. Boohoo Group bought Nasty Gal in 2017 after Nasty Gal filed for bankruptcy. The Boohoo Group already faced environmental critiques with their avid promotion of fast fashion. In 2019, Boohoo was named one of the least sustainable brands in the UK in a report published by the Environmental Audit Committee. Girl boss. Boohoo's environment rating has fallen to very poor in our most recent review. Girl boss. It uses few lower impact material, and there is no evidence that it has taken meaningful action to reduce or eliminate hazardous chemicals. Girl boss. Boohoo encourages a throwaway culture and makes consumers believe they need to shop more and more to stay on top of trends, creating a constant sense of need and ultimate dissatisfaction. This contributes to huge amounts of textile waste ending up in landfills as garments are discarded quicker than ever. Time and time again, investigations have shown that Boohoo and its suppliers carry out exploitative practices that harm workers throughout the supply chain. Girl boss. So they're basically using fast fashion factory workers. They are exploiting factory workers in third world countries. Fuck those women though. You could buy a t-shirt for $7.99 that says girl boss, even though probably a child made it, or a woman who is not being paid, or any human who is just not being paid any sort of livable wage in really unsanitary and probably really dangerous conditions. They are ruining the planet, but it's okay because girl boss. This is not to say that success is wrong, or that we shouldn't have goals, or that we shouldn't want any sort of financial stability or abundance. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm also not saying that healing, self-employment, or having any sort of ambition is bad, but they cannot be the end point to our feminism, especially when so many women are still fighting for safety, for survival, for basic human rights. Feminism was never meant to be apolitical. It was never meant to be an aesthetic. And it was never really meant to be marketed or like branded. It was supposed to be a revolution. And that means asking really difficult questions such as who benefits from this version of empowerment? Whose voices are being centered? And whose are being erased. The girl boss era may be coming to an end. I think it's still alive and well. If you're on TikTok, it's still alive and well. But that kind of flavor is still everywhere in TikTok trends, in wellness culture, in our expectations of what success should look like. So I promised that I would do an entire section on Florence Given. So let's talk about Florence Given. She is the best-selling author. She's an illustrator. She's a TikTok soundbite queen. The girl boss rebrand in feminist packaging. Her book, Women Don't Owe You Pretty, exploded on social media in 2020, quickly becoming the manifesto for a certain kind of entry-level feminism. It was bold, bright, it was easy to quote, and it was everywhere. Her phrases such as self-love is a revolution, cut off anyone who drains your energy, and you are the love of your own life were printed on tote bags and plastered on everybody's phone lock screens. It looked like feminism, but it was something else entirely. Florence Given doesn't offer politics. She offers the aesthetic of empowerment. Feminism filtered through the lens of branding, designed to be digestible, marketing, and unthreatening. It's kind of like a diet feminism or feminism light, stripped of any sort of radical roots, devoid of material critique, and safe enough for mainstream consumption. In a media landscape shaped by algorithms, attention is a currency, and Florence Given is the ideal influencer for a neoliberal platform culture that rewards aesthetic, virality, and performance over depth, accountability, and action, disruption. Her version of feminism centers the self. It tells women to look inward, to prioritize their boundaries, their self-esteem, their healing. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that. I think this is really important as well. And I think this is why a lot of people will refer to, myself included, will refer to Florence Given as kind of like entry-level feminism. When you're used to being... Oh, I still have coffee. When you are used to prioritizing men, for example, not yourself, when you are used to... when you're used to focusing on the male gaze and centering men, and then when you're younger and you come across someone like Florence and she's saying to like center yourself and like you are the love of your own life, and these things are perfect for, yes, an entry-level feminism, and there's nothing wrong with any of that. Everything she's saying, a lot of the things she's saying in her book is absolutely true, but my problem is if that's the limit, if that's where you stay, if that's as deep as your feminism goes, that's a problem. When personal empowerment becomes the full scope of your politics and it flattens your feminism into a personal project that centers yourself. It's only about empowering yourself, feeling good, buying the book, posting the quote, but there's no critique at all about the systems that made you feel so unworthy and so unlovable in the first place. No interrogation of class, race, capitalism or imperialism or patriarchy. No solidarity whatsoever, just a brand. Florence never really goes there. She doesn't mention Palestine. She's never, ever mentioned Palestine. As Black feminist and sociologist Tracy McMillan Cotham has said, any feminism that is not actively intersectional is just white supremacy in heels. And that's pretty much what Florence Given's work reflects, in my opinion. It's not about radical transformation, but the commercial rebranding of feminist language to serve the self. And the industry loves this because depoliticalized feminism is so easy to market and to sell. Empowerment looks good on a shelf and it makes people feel good. And when you feel good, you will buy more. I'm not trying to attack Florence Given as a human, as a person. I just wanted to point out the ways that her flavor of feminism really does seem to only ever be speaking to a particular section of women. In my opinion, it's the women who are in a position to buy her stuff. The way that she has become this kind of figurehead for a movement that she makes flat. She makes it kind of flat. And this is what happens when feminism gets absorbed into capitalism. It becomes sanitized and flat and personalized and kind of too polished. And it rewards people who stay very vague and who avoid the messy parts of power and politics. It promotes women who know how to say just enough to say that they've said something, but never enough to actually risk their money, their privilege, or their audience. And Bell Hooks warned us about this. Bell Hooks said that feminism is for everyone, but it is not about everybody feeling comfortable. There is something quite hollow and shallow about a feminism that only stretches as far as the comfort of the person who is performing it. Mainstream white feminism has become a curated performance, and the most glaring part of that performance is what it actually doesn't say. Topics such as Palestine become too complex. Talking about LGBT rights, I support everyone, ... the exploitation of black and brown women in global labour chains. Complete crickets. The more feminism becomes a personal brand, a business strategy, a podcast theme, a pastel aesthetic, the more it distances itself from risk and from responsibility. The silence around Palestine has been one of the most damning cultural exposures of white feminism in recent years. At least 60,000 Palestinians have been killed since October 2023. The vast majority of them have been women and children. Although the numbers are definitely way higher than that, they are not accounting for people missing and people who are still under the rubble. Entire neighborhoods have been flattened, journalists assassinated, doctors operating on babies without anesthesia. We are watching a genocide unfold in real time. And still, a wall of silence from the same white feminists who built their careers on women's empowerment. Where are the voices that claim to protect women when Palestinian women are being bombed in hospitals and schools, delivering babies through C-sections with no anesthetic, no medicine? Women, children have no sanitary products, not enough food to even produce breast milk. Where is the outrage when their bodies are being dragged from the rubbles? When we see mother after mother after mother cradling her dead child in her arms. The hypocrisy is mind-numbingly frustrating. This is not a lack of information. Sorry, I just don't know enough about the topic. Well, you can learn. You can learn. It's been almost 2 years. It is a deliberate, strategic choice to stay quiet and to stay palatable. So here are some contradictions that define white feminism in 2025. White feminism will preach things about freeing the nipple, but it will not say anything about the sterilization of Indigenous women at detention centres. It will sell you a $1,000 healing retreat on stolen land and then ignore genocide of Indigenous people. It will quote Audre Lorde and bell hooks while actively benefiting from the same systems who those women spent their lives critiquing and trying to dismantle. White feminism will post love is love during Pride Month and maybe add a little rainbow emoji to one of their posts, but will not say a word when anti-LGBT laws are being passed. A lot of white feminists don't actually want collective liberation or justice. They just want comfort. They just want status. They want their brand to look radical, but without actually being radical, without being uncomfortable, without being disruptive, without alienating any of their audience, without disrupting any of their income stream. There is no ethical version of feminism that ignores a genocide. There is no intersectionality in a feminism that centers whiteness at the expense of everyone else. There is no liberation in a feminism that only speaks when it is convenient. Real feminism is inconvenient. It is uncomfortable. It's political. It's disruptive. And it might alienate some people. What we've been sold as feminism, the girl boss, the aesthetic self-healer, the apolitical influencer with brand deals from fast fashion companies, is not liberation. It's just the same oppressive system dressed up in a new costume. Feminism has never been about becoming palatable, likable, or even marketable. It's not about climbing to the top of a system that was never even built for us in the first place. It is about imagining a world without those systems, with new systems. This is something that so many of the feminists who have shaped me have made really clear. And I will leave a link for all of my inspirations, all of my teachers down below for anyone that is interested. So bell hooks taught us that feminism is for everyone, not just the privileged, not just white, not just thin, not just beautiful, able-bodied, straight people. She said there can be no love without justice. Angela Davis warned us that if feminism doesn't include anti-capitalism and anti-racism, it is just elitism. Chidera Ageru taught us that softness is sacred, but not when it is used to silence our rage. That boundaries, embodiment, and self-worth are nothing if they are built on erasing the suffering of others. Adrienne Marie Brown says that movements are made of relationships, that the small is the seed of the large, and that collective healing, not individual branding, is what transforms systems. One of my favorite quotes from feminist Simone de Beauvoir is, "All oppression creates a state of war." This is no exception. Because here is what I believe feminism should actually be. It's not a ladder that you climb. It's not a product and it's not a performance. It is a living, breathing, communal, political ecosystem. It's a practice. It's an ongoing, ever-changing, ever-evolving space where all of our struggles are connected, where healing is not a solo individualistic project, and where care is not commodified. where rest is resistance, and where softness and rage can exist in the same space. You do not have to pick one or the other. I believe in a feminism that remembers and includes the body, a body that can hold grief, pleasure, and protest all in the same space, in the same container. I believe in a feminism that is more like a matriarchy, which is not just a flipped patriarchy. The patriarchy is a triangle and matriarchy is a circle with children, elderly people, and mothers in the center, and everyone else is included in that. Everyone is equal, but the most important people are the most vulnerable people. Matriarchy is not about ruling over men. It's about relational power, not domination. It's about care, reciprocity, interdependence, emotional intelligence, and embodied leadership. It's about making sure that everyone is seen, everyone gets fed, everyone gets held, everyone gets rest, and everyone is safe. And if your feminism doesn't really ask those questions, if it doesn't hold Palestine, femicide, climate change, racial injustice, misogyny, then is it actually feminism? So that is what I have for you today. Let me know if you liked it. Let me know if you want me to do a video in more detail about matriarchy and a matriarchal society and what that looks like. I would love to do that video. I also want to do a video about the self-love world, the world of self-love. But anyway, let me know what you want me to do, and I will make another video next week. So thank you so much for being here. I will see you in the next 7 to 10 days.